Welcome, everyone, to the Contact Center Prospectus podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today, we've got a very special guest. We've got Andreas Janssen. Now, Andreas, you are the founder and the CEO of Blauband in Germany, which is an e-commerce company. You have an interesting background, not only as the CEO running the company, you come from the marketing industry. You were actually CFO of Gray Advertising in Germany. So everything that we talk about here today, we're talking about the CX function. We're talking about contact centers and customer support and how that could actually be a competitive advantage, a tremendous advantage for business. So I like your CEO, CFO perspective background on it, because that just means that there's been critical thinking applied to everything we're talking about here today. But if you wouldn't mind, maybe explain just a little bit more about your background before we get started.
Thank you, Steve, so much for having me on this podcast. Yeah, I founded my e-commerce company of 2013. It literally started in my basement, but in Germany, we found companies in basements, not in garages. It has grown over the time quite tremendously. And today we ship sendings into 76 countries, mainly Europe, also Middle East, North Africa, Asia, and North America. And what we do is we literally run as a kind of a extended workbench, the D2C online business for brand manufacturers.
Fantastic. I know in a huge direct-to-consumer model, and you do that as marketplaces for a number of different companies, that the customer support role within that is quite important. And before we get into the importance, though, of that, I just wanted to, you have a very unique and I think interesting perspective on AI and the role of the live agent and how that interplay happens, but basically the power of the human brain and how that you can't replace pattern recognition in the way the human brain thinks with AI completely. Although there's lots of us that love to talk about technology and AI is going to take over everything. But what's your perspective on the power of the human brain and why it's so important in the customer service role?
So first of all, our business is literally about data and processes. So we deal a lot with tons of data and not only analyzing data, but also transporting it from A to B to other databases, etc. And we need to get insights out of these data like everyone else. That's maybe important to understand. So we deal a lot with algorithms. You can call them artificial intelligence. In the end, self-learning algorithms, knowledge analytic tools to get insights and to optimize our business towards the customer, also the processes, and in the end, customer satisfaction. What we found out and what my personal take is on the role of artificial intelligence and the combination or the work split between, I would call it, between AI and the human brain is that the human brain, from my point of view, is not, at least at a short term or midterm, not being replaced by artificial intelligence because it has strengths which are, from my point of view, not capable of being replaced by any AI, at least at the closer future, how I see it. The human brain is, how I perceive it, is a pattern recognition machine. So maybe an example is a person who you've never seen enters a room and you get in a moment, in a glimpse of a moment, you get an impression about the mood of that person, what the intention, etc. And in this glimpse of a moment, the impression you get is somehow so profound and so vast if you start thinking about it. And if you then later get to know this person better and better, sometimes you will have these moments where you say, how could I, in this short moment, be so precise in my perception of that person and the intention of that person? And this is something which I think represents the strength of the human brain, is where the human brain is able to derive out of a huge, vast amplitude, I would say, of information, good insights. And this capability, I don't know how this will ever be replaced by any artificial intelligence. So how I see it is artificial intelligence is a good tool to prepare this. So how we use it, we use artificial intelligence to prepare data clouds or visualize data. But once we have a visual or many visuals of data, then we look at it ourselves. And then we start recognizing patterns, which, as I say, I'm convinced no artificial intelligence can do the same like we can do in moments.
So what you're talking about is there is a collective history that we have as humans, and we have intuition, we have perceptions, hunches, insights. We were just talking before this. If you think about that in a non-business context, like a mother's intuition, how could AI ever replace a mother's intuition? So what you're talking about here is all the collective experiences that we have as people in our industries. You can't put that into AI. And in fact, what goes into AI is all AI knows. So if it's fed one certain direction, information, that's all it's going to know. That's all it's going to be able to spit back to you. But AI has a tremendous way of giving us the data, the knowledge to make the right decisions. And in the world of customer service, in running your business, in interacting with your customers, that's an empowerment tool for the live agent. They can make them better and better. But I think what you're saying ultimately here, AI, as it's applied also in customer service, it's never going to replace the live agent. Is that your proposition?
I'm 100% convinced, and that's my take. And I think also it is not necessary to replace that part, because that is already working really perfect. That's the big strength of the human brain, is this ability to recognize patterns out of a unformalized context, to see with a glimpse, as I said, an important piece where it would take a machine like ages to come there. And it's not necessary, because that is something which we can really do very well and very quickly. So what we need AI for, from my point of view, is to take away from us all the other work where we are not so good at, which is blocking our time to work in the areas where we are really strong. So like highly repetitive, low-end work, calculations, whatever, where a machine can do it within millions of a second, whereas it takes us like half an hour. This part can be taken away, creating a template for an answer to any client. This can be done by AI, but having a notion of, is this a difficult client? Should we maybe give the client a call? This is something a machine cannot do. When I started my business, I did all my phone calls myself, and I started with products literally for kids. So my clients were mothers. Mothers as clients, if it is about their kids, are very protective. So they're challenging clients. So you cannot just send, I would say, stupid answers to these mothers if, for example, have some anxiety about the protection of their kids in relation to our products. You need to answer these anxieties in a different way. It's not a rational answer. You need to calm them down or give them comfort. So when I have them on the phone, I could tell you after a fraction of a second, is this mother anxious at the moment? And does she fear about the safety of her kid? Or is she just bored? Or does she have technical questions? And then within a short moment, I could then decide which way to choose to satisfy the client needs. And this, I cannot think about any AI machine which can reproduce this capabilities. So my problem was sending out the right answers afterwards. This can take and do any AI. So I would have loved to have an AI tool to make all this work so I could take on more calls, because this is something which you cannot replace. That's the thing. So I think the AI will not take away or replace our agent. Never. The AI will help our agents focus on what they are best in.
And before we started recording here, we had a call, and we had a very interesting part of that conversation, which was, I call it the deprivation study, but it's just as we get into how AI and human live agents are a part of the customer service function. We had a very important and interesting conversation about how important that customer service function is overall to your business. And I asked you this question, and I said, Andreas, if I just took customer support away from your business, what would happen? And you said three things. You said in 2 to 3 days, we'd be in very serious trouble. You said we'd be blocked from all of our major marketplaces. And within 30 days, we'd be wiped out. So this is how important this CX function is to your business as an analogy to how important it is to all the industries that are using customer service. Because there is a perception in the industry that it's a necessary evil. Of course, we're going to have customers. Of course, they're going to have questions, but it's a big cost center. This is your CFO perspective that I want to ask you about. It's not just a cost center. It's a value center. It's a driver of business. When you were talking about how you were handling the fears and the concerns of those mothers, that wasn't just anybody can do this. It's a necessary evil. That's an important part of the engine of your business, is satisfying your customers. What is your recommendation just to everyone who's listening here in terms of thinking of customer service support, not as a cost center, but as a value center for your business and how important it is?
If I think back into the time when I had the pure CFO hat on, of course, it is now production, it is no sales. So we would consider it as a cost center. That's a difficult perspective on it. I think the problem starts if you put the customer support into one part or look at it as one thing. I think the right approach is to analyze the different parts and to distinguish the different parts which a customer support has. A customer support, that's what I told you also in our last conversation, has a constant contact to your clients. So if I take only this, then it is one of the best sources I have to get information about my client, because I have the clients on the phone. And as I told you, that they are all human brains. So they have the ability to get insight about the mood and the perception of your clients toward your product and your services. So the question is only, how do I get this information in a way that I don't have to make interviews with my whole customer team every day? So the question is more, how do I derive this information from my customer support? So I have to start to organize not only the answering part of the customer support, but also the information, the data which I get from them. For example, once a week, we have a call with our customer agents and we have them report the most important. So we tell them, if you close your eyes and think about the last week, what comes into your head right away, and tell us what it is. Because normally either these are things which just happened and then they therefore very present, or there are things which are really important. So we get this information, and then what you said is a cost or a value driver, then you get value, because if you can process this data and derive valuable information, which then helps you perfectionize or optimize your products or your services. But if you put everything into one pot and then make maybe one KPI minutes per call or so, then this is not able to reflect the total function or to the total possible value of your customer support.
I love that word, possible value, and tapping into that. You talked on that last call about you had stopped whole shipments that had come out of the warehouses and things that had, because of the feedback that we were getting through the agents with the customers, avoiding problems, not only accelerating revenue cycles and things like that. But if you could, I'd love to have you give a rating on the importance of the customer service function. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, if you literally said 1, customer service, it's not important to the support and growth of my company at all. 10, it's vital to the overall support and the growth of my company. Scale of 1 to 10, where would you put it and why?
It's a little difficult to answer because it depends very much on the situation you're in. Customer support, at least in our business, can be just a necessity. Without you cannot run the business model. That's what I told you. We would be out of the business if we didn't have one. But I wouldn't say that in all situations of my company, the customer support has always been a growth driver or a 10 as a value add to my total business, because in times where we see, for example, heavy growth, the customer support fulfills its basic function. I cannot concentrate on how can my customer support drive more growth because I have already so much growth. Then it's more a optimization challenge. I need to optimize my customer support so that it fulfills its function, but I don't need more growth. Whereas if I have a more competitive situation where other products come into my area and try to challenge my offering, then I need this differentiation aspect of my customer support. So I would have a call every day with my customer support and ask them the question, why is this client happy with us and this client not? What do they love? What do they need? What do they see? And then all of a sudden you would have a 10 in terms of your rating. So it depends very much of the situation you're in.
There's a great book that came out decades ago called Blue Ocean Strategy. And it talked about companies that operate, most companies, typical companies, operate in a red ocean, an ocean that is red from the battle of competition. And that what you're trying to do is move into a bluer ocean where you're defining your market differently, you're supporting your market differently. So you've gained a competitive advantage and then you're moving to a more bluer ocean. And most companies don't have the luxury of just being in a growth mode all the time. Like most companies are in a heavy competitive environment. And what you just articulated there is that this is a big competitive advantage, that knowledge, that insight. If you could unpack that just a little bit more as customer service in a competitive marketplace, how it can be a competitive advantage for your company.
The most important thing is that you need to satisfy your customers, or you need also to give them the idea that you're with them and you're fulfilling their needs. As I just said, if you're very small, like I was in the beginning, I had them all on my ear. So I didn't need some kind of an organized customer support. But when you're growing, that stops. So now as a CEO in my company, I have different teams which don't oversee the whole thing. So then I need this ear, which I had before, to the customer. And this is my customer support. That's literally it. We are an internet business model. So I don't have other ears than my customer support. That's as simple as it is. So the more the happiness of the customer becomes important as a differentiator towards my competition, the more important my customer support gets. That's as easy as it is. So if my product is standardized, or I even have other boundaries against my competition, I might not really need this type of. That's maybe the reason why if I call my telephone company, I'm hanging on the phone and waiting desperately on someone picking up. And sometimes it takes me like half an hour until I get someone or I hang up. So I ask myself, how can they run a business doing that? Because for me, it wouldn't be possible. And I think for those guys that the customer support is purely a cost center because they have other boundaries which protects their products and their customer relation. Because obviously, if I could run away, I would after every call run away. With our products, the customer has a choice. So they buy and I want them to buy again, but I don't have a contract that can run away to anyone else. So I need to make them come again. And this is either a strong product, but the more comparable my product gets, the more I need other links to a customer. And this is the customer support. And this is my relationship to the customers. The more comparable it gets, the more important the customer support becomes. That's very easy. It's easy on a conceptual level to understand, but it's difficult to realize then.
But I think what you've just articulated is because, again, most companies don't have the benefits of these other boundaries or monopolies in their marketplace. It's very competitive. And what I'm taking away from this is your recommendation is to make customer service not only the learning, the make me smarter, the insights of what's going on so I can make better decisions, but as a second major advantage is create a competitive advantage through customer service. That will differentiate you. That will keep others coming back. In fact, we had a gentleman on the podcast, and he said literally our CSAT scores, our customer satisfaction scores, as they go up, we see our shopper frequency going up. As our shopper frequency goes up, our revenue growth goes up. It is a major competitive advantage that is tied to actual revenue growth for the company. And I think that's a major takeaway that is on the polar opposite of it's a cost center. So I love that. If you could, what is your recommendation for others that are leaders, business leaders, or CX leaders in the industry? If there was one thing that you wanted them to take away from our entire conversation here today, what would you want to leave them with?
I would say once your customer support is established, start looking into it, because you will find a lot of things which can drive value in your business model. So I would recommend, do not stop once the basic work is done, it's running, it's good, then start looking into it.
I love that. So it's like an onion. You keep peeling back the layers. Don't stop at the basic function, but keep looking for ways that you can drive value.
Yeah.
If there were folks here that had additional questions for you, would it be appropriate that we would maybe give them a link to your LinkedIn profile if they had questions to ask?
Yeah, you can do, of course.
Fantastic. Andreas, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. I'd love the CEO, founder, CFO perspective on the value that you can drive from customer service. So I just appreciate all the insights that you gave us today.
It was a great pleasure for me. Thanks a lot.